How will the provision in the Bali Roadmap requiring comparability of efforts be interpreted by the next U.S. administration and the wider international community?
Well, this is a key issue for the negotiations. It's basically saying we'll set the targets among the developed, industrialized nations based on comparability of effort. And what does that mean? I mean, there's several different ways to interpret that. The Europeans might argue that that means a similar percentage reduction in emissions below a baseline, say 1990 or 2005. I think the U.S. is likely to argue that it should reflect a similar level of economic effort, so a similar percentage reduction in GDP effort by each country. So, for example, if we did that, the U.S. would probably come in with a target at 1990 levels by 2020, while Europe would have a target at minus 30% below 1990 by 2020. Those levels of target are about the same in terms of the cost, the percentage of GDP spent on this. It's like 0.5%, not that significant. On the other hand, if you did it based on targets, obviously a minus 30% target for the U.S. would be much more expensive in the U.S. than the same target in Europe, because Europe, of course, has Bulgaria and Romania and a number of Eastern European countries to draw less expensive reductions from. So I think that's the way you have to think about that. Are we talking about, we say comparability of effort, are we talking about comparability of cost? Are we talking about comparability of reductions in terms of tons? Clearly, whoever wins in the U.S. is going to be concerned about the costs. We're in a recession, perhaps headed into a worse recession. We've got lots of issues on the economic front. Gasoline prices have doubled, so people are worried about the economics. And I think the biggest cloud on the horizon for U.S. action is really how severe the recession is in the end of 2008 and into 2009.
What other issues in U.S. domestic politics will affect U.S. climate action?
Well, there's two things on the U.S. front that are really important to keep your eye on. One is action by states. As I mentioned at the outset, we do a lot of work with California. The state of California has the toughest state law in the country. It requires 1990 levels across the entire California economy by 2020, requires very tough car standards, greenhouse gas emission standards for cars, etc. Number of states have followed California's lead. Those state actions are pressing the Congress to act. So that's a very positive thing. It's something to watch as this debate unfolds. The other piece that's important to watch is there was a major Supreme Court case here in the United States, Massachusetts versus EPA, decided just last year, where the Supreme Court said, look, this is a pollutant. CO2 is a pollutant. EPA should take action to regulate that pollutant. We just had a notice of new rulemaking issued on Monday here in the U.S., and that didn't get a lot of press coverage, but it's very significant because it means whichever candidate is president, he must now start a regulatory process to reduce greenhouse gases significantly through the Clean Air Act. That set of regulatory actions will put real pressure on the Congress to act. I mean, there's a risk. Congress walked away from the bill 2 weeks ago here that would have helped us on climate. But I think with this regulatory thing coming forward in our system, the courts can force the agencies to take action. That's cooking, and that's going to be a forcing function to keep the pressure on the Congress to get this job done and to get a significant bill underway. And if they fail to do it, then we get regulatory action. That'll take a little longer, but it will certainly lay the groundwork, and it'll make it easier for either candidate as president to say, look, I can negotiate in Copenhagen because this is coming. I've got to do this under the law regardless of whether the Congress is willing to act. So I think those are two very positive things that often aren't noted when you think about the U.S. context. We just think, well, will the president do it? Will the Congress do it? There's two other places, the states and this regulatory approach via EPA, that are very promising for forcing action in the U.S. Okay, well, I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this way. I've saved a lot of carbon emissions by not flying all the way to New Zealand, but I'd love to come to New Zealand and hoping to do that in the future. I hope we've answered many of the questions you have. If you have other questions, feel free to send me an email. It's nhelme, H-E-L-M-E, @ccap.org, or visit our website, www.ccap.org. Again, thank you very much.